Next kind of things we got to talk about are bias. There's a bunch listed here on the slide. Under coverage is when people don't get included in a sample. Non-response is when people choose not to be in a sample. Response is when people decide to lie or they say what the survey wants to hear. And wording bias is when the question kind of dictates your answer. The big thing to remember when you're talking about bias is you always need to talk about a direction. Who does it overstate the opinion of? Who does it understate the opinion of? Don't just say undercoverage bias. Say undercoverage bias and it's going to understate this. So for example, the most common example of undercoverage is homeless population. So if you are going to identify the homeless as an undercoverage bias, you're going to say there's undercoverage bias. We're understating the opinion of homeless population. This is new. The last two are new vocabulary this year, retrospective versus prospective. Those are for observational studies. Retrospective is when you pick a point in time and you look backwards and you kind of study information from the past. Prospective study is when you start picking people and then you follow them moving forward. Okay, observational study versus experiment. Observational study, people are randomly selected. You are basically watching what's going to happen but not influencing the results. An experiment is when you are randomly assigned, and the magic phrase there is where you deliberately impose a treatment on individuals and then measure their responses. The definitions underneath are all there. Please kind of have an understanding of those. Explanatory variable is the same as a factor, the cause. Response variable is your effect. Lurking variable, a variable that's not in the analysis, but it could be influencing the results. Remember our ice cream sales and drowning in swimming pool example. The season of the year is our lurking variable. A confounding variable is when two variables are so intertwined that we really can't separate one from the other, and we really don't know which one is causing the result. More experiment vocabulary. What is a treatment? A treatment is what you apply to the individual. And if they ask you to list the treatments, they don't just want you to say there are 6 treatments. They want you to give all of them explicitly. There's experimental units, subjects, completely randomized design. The big deal is there, you can draw pictures, like that picture down there in the bottom right that shows how we did a completely randomized design. We took 150 stat students, we randomly assigned them to 2 groups. We gave 2 different treatments, played classical music, we played no music, and we compared their test scores. Match pair. This is a specific example of an experiment where each subject receives both treatments. So for example, like a taste test, or the example I gave is like wash half your hair with one shampoo, half your hair with the other shampoo, and see which one like feels better. The other way that it can be accomplished is if you have groups that have some sort of dependence between them. So for example, married couples or twins, and each half of that pair gets one treatment, the other half gets the other, and then you compare. That picture kind of explains it a little bit. Scope of inference. Know this table. Have it written down on your formula sheet. Have it somewhere accessible, because this is definitely something that that's going to be as part of a question. Like, what can you infer? If the population was randomly selected, that's your observational study. So kind of over here on the left, that's your observational study. Along the top is your experiment. If people were both randomly selected and randomly assigned, that's your best case scenario. You can make inferences about everything, about the population as a whole and about cause and effect. But if you only have one of those, for example, you only have random selection but no randomly assigning, you're in an observational study world. Or if you only have random assign and you don't have random select, you're in an experiment world, and you can infer cause and effect. And then there's the one down here where these are the garbage studies. If you haven't randomly selected, you haven't randomly assigned, you can't infer anything.